Fight fans, welcome to the PBC podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Buhari and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome everyone to the PBC podcast. I'm Kenneth Buhari.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
Thank you guys for joining us as always. This week we're going to look ahead to Saturday night's PBC card, a card I've been waiting for. Plus, on Toe to Toe, Mike and I will list our top 5 Hall of Fame candidates among active fighters today. Speaking of active fighters, Mike, we saw a great one hang up the gloves last week. Mikey Garcia announced, or maybe not announced, but posted on his social media pages that he was a retired boxer. I did speak to Mikey last week, and he confirmed that he was in fact retired and that he had posted that weeks before anyone had noticed. What were your thoughts on the announcement or lack thereof?
I actually thought it was sort of a cool way of doing it, to be honest. You know, sort of was Mikey, who's always been a little bit understated. Yes. It was just consistent with his personality. I also have to say I wasn't shocked that he decided to call it quits, even though he's only 34, I think, right? I wondered after his upset loss to Sandor Martin in his most recent fight whether his heart was still in it. Well, evidently his heart wasn't still in it. And there you go.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you could tell he said he was happy, no regrets, wasn't looking back. So, and like you said, I think it was done in true Mikey Garcia fashion. Low key, simple. He was never big on the spotlight. What are your favorite memories of him?
Well, first, maybe you know this, but Mikey didn't want to be a boxer. He originally wanted to go into law enforcement, but he sort of just drifted into the sport in large part because it was the family business with his dad and his brother who ended up being his trainer. I think that makes his accomplishments all the more remarkable. He's sort of a reluctant warrior. I would say my favorite memory of him was his ability to destroy one elite opponent after another in 4 divisions. My favorite victory being his decision over Adrian Broner. Size just wasn't a factor for him until he got up to 147. Then maybe it was. His technical ability, his mastery of the fundamentals were just remarkable. Yeah,
they really were. I was ringside for quite a few of his fights when he returned. The Broner one does stand out to me because I wasn't expecting him to look that good at 140. But I think my 2 favorites are probably the Robert Easter fight and the one versus Sergey Lipinets. I had gone down to see Easter in camp with Kevin Cunningham in Florida prior to him fighting Mikey, and he really trained his butt off for that fight. The game plan was excellent, but Mikey just, he disarmed him, hurt him, broke him down. It was really impressive. And as far as the Lipinets fight, I could see how hard Lipinets was hitting him from ringside. That was a very tough, extremely impressive performance by Garcia. Is Mikey Garcia a Hall of Famer?
Well, the short answer is yes, but I wanted to preface this by saying that I think we sometimes assume too readily that a successful fighter will end up in the Hall of Fame. That's not necessarily true, especially after the Hall changed its threshold from 5 to 3 years, which has sort of created a glut of guys who arguably deserve to be in. But all that said, again, I do believe that Mikey will get in. 4-division title holder, became a pound for pounder, dominating victories over a long list of opponents. I was just going to take a peek back and look at he had a couple of streaks, and one before his long hiatus and then one after. But just the first one alone, he beat in order Jonathan Victor Barros, Orlando Salido, Juan Manuel Lopez, Roman Martinez, Juan Carlos Burgos, then Bijan Slatikainen. Then he came back and then he beat Broner and Lipinets and Easter. I mean, that's just a crazy list of guys that he beat. So yeah, I think he's going to get in definitely.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, he was 35-0 with 30 knockouts before he fought Errol Spence. He was, you mentioned a 4-division champ. He was a unified champ at 135. He had a title at 140. I think Spence's mastery has somehow diminished Mikey Garcia in some eyes. It didn't take away from any of his accomplishments. We brought up Lipinets before. When Jaron Boots Ennis stopped Lipinets in 6 rounds, which is his biggest win, I think. He was praised for that, and rightfully so. but Mikey beat Lipinets years earlier, and he did it at Lipinets' best weight. I mean,
that's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. I think what the Spence thing is that, Mikey had this momentum, and it just, I've never seen momentum come to a crashing halt like it did in that fight.
Yeah.
It's just like 1 second he was this hot guy with momentum, and the next minute, boom, it was just over.
Yeah, I got it. Props to Errol. But look, you're right. The momentum. He was unified at 135. He beat Salido, unlike some fighter who I will not mention.
Your favorite.
Broner. So many on and on. He has my vote, when I see his name on the ballot. Now, we'll have more on the Hall of Fame and today's fighters a little later in the show. So for now, let's jump right into the PBC fight of the week. On Saturday night, Premier Boxing Champions presents a great night of action with a stacked card from top to bottom. Headlining the event, undefeated WBC World Featherweight Champion Mark Magnifico Magsayo makes his first title defense, and it's not going to be easy whatsoever, or not, or it might be, who knows, as he takes on the unbeaten former 122-pound champion Ray Vargas. The action on Showtime Championship Boxing begins at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and we begin here with the essentials.
Okay, here we go. Mr. Magsayo is 24-0 with 16 knockouts. Vargas 35-0 with 22. I like fights where fighters are combined 59-0. They both obviously are 5-0 in their last 5. Magsayo 2 KOs, no KOs for Vargas. So it's 5 straight unanimous decisions. Last fight for Magsayo, Gary Russell Jr. majority decision to win his title in January. For Vargas, it was Leonardo Baez, unanimous decision in November. 67% knockout ratio for Magsayo, 63 for Vargas, which is kind of interesting because I think people think of Magsayo as the knockout guy, but those are comparable. Magsayo, 131 professional rounds, Vargas 210. Magsayo's 27, Vargas 31. Magsayo turned pro in 2013, Vargas 2010. They both fight from an orthodox stance. Here's where Vargas has an edge, if you consider height an edge. Magsayo is 5'6", Vargas is 5'10" and a half. Magsayo has a 68-inch reach, Vargas 70 and a half. Magsayo is from the Philippines, Vargas from Mexico.
Such a great fight. Let's jump right into it. What are Magsayo's keys to victory?
I think Vargas is going to stick and move. So Magsayo is going to have to patiently, methodically cut off the ring, which isn't going to be easy to do. Vargas is really good. Magsayo's advantages are his physical strength and punching power. At least that's what they've been in the past. He's going to have to use those edges to get to Vargas and win the fight. I should add this. He did outpoint Russell, but Russell was one-handed most of the fight, and he was behind. And Magsayo was behind on the cards against Julio Ceja before that, but ended up stopping him. It's just, I'm not saying that necessarily says that much, but it's something to think about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, he's probably learned from those experiences, but I think you nailed it. He needs to use what he's got, and, the power, the athleticism, the size, the strength. Last week on our podcast, he spoke about countering Gary Russell. Well, that is going to be key against Ray Vargas. What are Vargas's keys to victory?
Avoid Magsayo's power. Don't engage toe to toe, at least not too often. You got to pick your spots. Vargas needs to do, as I suggested, stick and move, pick his spots, and not fight Magsayo's fight. I think it's pretty clear that Vargas, at least from my perspective, it's pretty clear that Vargas is the better, more seasoned boxer. He needs to take advantage of that and his height to frustrate Magsayo. And I'll add something here too. Vargas carries some pop in his punches. If he can control the fight from the outset, I think there's a chance that he could actually break Magsayo down.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's going to have to be disciplined. He's got great boxing ability, and he's going to need it. He can't get caught in a firefight. We've seen him hit the canvas before. We've seen him hurt before. He can't afford to try and take Magsayo's bombs. What, in your opinion, will be the determining factor?
Sort of what we've been dancing around. I think the key will be whether Vargas can stay out of harm's way. If he can avoid trading with Magsayo, stay off the ropes, I think that will work to his advantage. If he can't, well, it could be a short fight.
I agree with you, but who are you picking?
Well, again, if you're reading between the lines, you might have gotten that I think Vargas is going to outbox Magsayo. He'll use his long jab, throw more than enough power shots to win rounds, and use his feet to keep himself out of trouble, at least most of the time. Um, you brought up a good point about the countings. You just got to be really careful about that. I like Magsayo's grit and determination, as well as his power, of course. I just think Vargas is a better all-around fighter. I'm going to say Vargas by a clear decision, but I have to say this is pretty close to a 50-50 fight. I really like both guys.
Yeah, me too. I think it's 50-50 for sure. I mean, two undefeated, hungry, determined, really good, talented fighters, just with different styles. However, I see a stoppage here. For some reason, I think that Vargas is prideful and he is going to stand his ground at times. And Magsayo isn't afraid of a fire fight. So I am going with Ray Vargas by stoppage win, somewhere between rounds 7 and 9. In what should be a great fight. I think he's going to box early, and then he's going to step in with some good shots, and he should have the range to land while not getting hit. But hey, Magsayo is live, 50-50 fight in my opinion. Let's go to the
real quick. That's okay. This is one of the few fights in my mind where anything is possible.
Yeah.
I won't be surprised if Magsayo wins a decision or if he knocks out Vargas. I won't be surprised if Vargas wins a decision or knocks out Magsayo. I think anything's possible in this fight.
It's just a great fight. And I think that with so much on the line for both of these guys that they're going to take it to another level. Now, in the co-feature, another excellent matchup. Former 122-pound champion Brandon Figueroa makes his featherweight debut against Carlos Castro. Mike, I love this fight.
Yeah, it's a good matchup, both in terms of competitiveness and entertainment value, I think. Figueroa certainly didn't pick a pushover for his first fight after moving up to 126. Castro's a really good all-around fighter, a good fiery boxer. He'll beat you up if you give him a chance. Figueroa, I think, also is still a little bit bitter, if that's the right word, over his loss to Stephen Fulton. He thought he won that fight. He's pissed off, and I think his plan is to take out his anger on Castro.
Now, with both guys coming off losses, how important is this fight for them?
It's very important. Figueroa obviously doesn't want back-to-back losses, which obviously is a terrible look. And he wants to get a title shot at 126 ASAP. That doesn't happen if he loses. The same goes for Castro. He wants to be perceived as an elite guy. Back-to-back losses, back-to-back losses can be overcome. I thought of Marco Antonio Barrera's losses to Junior Jones, but we're talking about Marco. We're talking about a Hall of Famer, though. It's a really, really hard thing to do. This is a must-win, I think, for both guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that in mind, given that it's a must-win, I assume they're going to bring their A games. Who do you like? How do you see the fight playing out?
Again, I think it's a really good matchup. I like both guys, and I think both of them are going to have success at times in the fight. But I think Figueroa is going to carry his strength up to 126 and gradually wear Castro down. I'm going to say Figueroa by late knockout or clear decision. I think Figueroa is the real deal. He's a really, really good fighter.
I agree with you. I think Castro is a really good fighter as well. I like Figueroa by close decision here. I think that Castro's going to make him work. He's going to box. He's going to be on his back foot. And Figueroa, ultimately, his volume punching and nonstop aggression will likely be the difference. Now, in the TV opener, the undefeated lightweight sensation Frank Martin from the Derek James camp takes on late substitute Jackson Marenez. Mike, first, let's start with Martin. What are your thoughts on him?
Love Martin. He has those God-given gifts, especially his speed. He's technically really sound, as you'd expect, with Derek James as your mentor. And he's a guy on the verge of busting out. He's hungry. This is a dangerous, dangerous guy right now.
What about his opponent? I mean, Marinez is a late substitute. Who does that benefit more, Martin or Marinez?
I kept going back and forth on this. Probably Martin. I don't think he cares too much who his opponent is, at least until he gets to the next level. He was going to fight Nunez. Now it's Marinez. They have different styles, different strengths, but I think Martin is at a different level from both of them. And I'm sure he thinks the same thing. Marinez has to face a hot, talented guy like Martin on a week's notice. That can't be
a tough one.
Yeah, that can't be an easy thing to do.
I will say this: I heard Frank Martin on Chicken Talk earlier tonight, and he said he believes Marinez is a tougher fight. What makes Marinez a threat?
Uh, I think he's a very, very good boxer, as he demonstrated against Raleigh Romero. I mean, I think I'd have to go back, but I think I actually scored that for Marinez, even though Romero won
quite a few people
a close
did.
decision. Yeah. But I just don't think he's on Martin's level in terms of boxing, though. And I think Marinez is also vulnerable, at least based on the last fight. Richard Comey, who is a big puncher, stopped him in 6 rounds. I see Martin outboxing Marinez and then taking him out late in the fight.
I like it. I like Martin here too, and I've got the same exact prediction. I think he gets him out of there between rounds 8 to 10, I would say. Wouldn't be surprised if it goes the distance as well. Just a reminder, guys, in our prediction league, Mike and I are both 26 wins, 6 losses, 1 defeat. That will not change this week. It's time for Mike and I to go toe-to-toe, and this week's topic is really simple. Top 5 potential Hall of Famers today among active fighters today. Who do we believe is headed to the Hall of Fame? We're going to go in ascending order, of course. So, Mike, go for it.
Okay, as usual, I just want to quickly preface this by saying, one, this was harder than I thought. I think I could have come up with a dozen guys or more that I'm pretty sure will be elected to the Hall of Fame one day, although you never know. Whittling that down to 5 just wasn't very easy. I also want to mention one guy who didn't make my list, but probably should have. I almost asked if we could make this 6, and that would be Gennady Golovkin. He doesn't have many of those defining victories you look for, but he ruled the middleweight division for so long, and he had those 23 consecutive knockouts against, good opposition. So he really should be on my list, but he's just somehow didn't make it.
So who's your number 5?
So and I even cheated on number 5. So so this was actually really hard for me. So my number 5 is the winner of the anticipated fight between Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Crawford. I think they're both on their way to the Hall, no matter what. But the winner of this fight, particularly if he delivers a convincing victory, will enhance his legacy in a big way. Spence already has wins over Kell Brook, Lamont Peterson, Mikey Garcia, Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, Yordenis Ugas. Add Crawford to that list, and we're talking something truly special. Crawford is a 3-division title holder, one of the dominating guys of his era, pound for pound guy for a long time. And he just had his breakthrough knockout of Sean Porter. If he could beat Spence, it gets a lot harder to criticize his resume. I also thought of the possibility of a series of fights between these two guys. Then you just don't know how it would affect the legacy. You just have to wait and see how the series plays out. But it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, we might see a trilogy. Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
I like that pick. They are actually my number 6. The winner, seeing as how we don't have a winner yet, I couldn't put either one on the list. But my number 5 is Jermell Charlo, the reigning undisputed 154-pound champion. Guys, this guy turned pro when George Bush II was president. That's how long he's been doing this. And, he has beaten a who's who of 154-pounders, and he's done it through multiple generations. I mean, he's seen whole sects of 154-pounders come and go, and he's emerged on top throughout the years. I mean, we've got a new group coming in, Tim Tszyu and Sebastian Fedora, so I can't wait to see what he does there. But I think he has established himself as not just one of the best fighters today, but one of the greatest 154-pounders of all time, if not the greatest when it's all said and done.
That's a really good call. Yeah, he's one of the guys that could easily be in my top 5. The thing is, he's been good for a long time, and he's just now really starting to get the recognition that he deserves. More and more people are starting to say stuff like you just said. I mean, the guy doesn't. There's really no weakness there. He slipped up in a couple fights, but the rematches were just absolutely brutal with it, which I think really added to his legacy. So, and he's just like in his prime. So there's going to be more to come. So I can't wait to see. He could end up being at the top of this list. Who knows? Yeah,
you never know. Let's go to number 4. I'll do my number 4 first. My number 4 is an undefeated world champion today. He goes by the name of Alexander Usyk, the former undisputed cruiserweight champion and the current unified heavyweight champion of the world. I think those are credentials enough. Obviously, the huge upset of Anthony Joshua, but also emerging as the best cruiserweight of this era and the best cruiserweight since Evander Holyfield. This one's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I forgot to mention something when I was prefacing this. I did not include Mikey Garcia on my list because we already talked about him. So he could also easily be in the top 5, but I didn't consider him. My number 4, and again, to the listeners, we didn't talk about this at all before we did it. My number 4 is Alexander Usyk. Yeah, I think he sealed his Hall of Fame fate with his victory over Anthony Joshua to win 3 heavyweight titles. Remember, he was already one of the 2 or 3 best cruiserweights of all time, with victories over all of his main rivals at that weight. I personally don't think he was as good as Evander Holyfield, who's one of my all-time favorites among cruiserweights, but some people do. Some people put him on that level. And then he moved up a weight and took down one of the top big guys, by a convincing unanimous decision. I just think that put him over the edge. And again, he's another guy. He's just in his prime. He's not finished. Imagine if he beats Joshua again and then fights and beats Fury, which is a possibility. Now, this guy could be one of the very, very best of his era.
Yeah, that would be something else if he beat Tyson Fury.
Yeah.
Put him in the Hall of Fame right away. Forget the 5-year wait. If he were to do 3-year wait, if he were to do something like that. Let's go on to who's your number? Well, let's go to number 3. Actually, I just realized we both have the same number 4. My number 3 is Leo Santa Cruz, another fighter who doesn't get mentioned enough, in my opinion, when you talk about the great fighters of this period. But this is a 4-division world champion, champion of, bantamweight, super bantamweight, featherweight, and at 130 pounds. Has got a really, really excellent list of wins. Carl Frampton, obviously in his prime. Carl Frampton. Abner Maris in his prime. This guy could beat Kiko Martinez, who obviously scored that huge upset last year. This guy beat Kiko Martinez years ago. Lots of good wins, lots of really fun, impressive performances, and of course the accomplishments to boot. So my number 3 is Leo Santa Cruz. Who do you got?
Well, ditto everything you said on Leo. When I think of him, I think of a guy who works his behind off for every fight. Couldn't possibly be in better shape for his fights. Throws all those punches, and he's just so consistent. He's like a machine. So I like the call on Leo Santa Cruz. Not on my list, but I like that call. My number 3 is Tyson Fury. I know Fury doesn't have a deep resume, but not many heavyweights do. But he did win his biggest fights, which has made him the dominant big man since Vladimir Klitschko was at his peak. He's the best of his era, Fury is. He easily outpointed Klitschko to become champion, took time off to deal with his inner demons, whatever those are, and then returned to regain his status. In his most important series, he's 2-0-1 against another one of his principal rivals and a likely Hall of Famer himself, Deontay Wilder. And most people think he should be 3-0. He's just the man at heavyweight now for quite a long time. Now he could end up fighting the winner of Usyk and Joshua, the Usyk-Joshua rematch. If he gets that fight and wins, which I think is likely personally, then he obviously has even stronger Hall credentials. But even if he loses, I think he's already done enough to get in. He's in.
Yeah, I wrestled with him quite a bit. Ultimately, he did not make my list, but I will not quibble with anyone who does have him on the list. And so on their list, I should say. So I hear you. I'd like to see how his career ends up. I'd like to see him make some more defenses of his title, kind of like what we saw against Dillian White, and for him to fight the winner of Usyk versus Joshua too. But no question, he is absolutely up there. Let's go to number 2. Who do you have?
Okay, so 2 and 1. I said this exercise was difficult, but 2 and 1 could not have been easier for me. so my number 2 was, I didn't even have to think about it. My number 2 is Roman Gonzalez. I think there are only 2 or 3, maybe 4 slam dunk first ballot Hall of Famers at this very moment, and Chocolatito is one of them. He was the dominant little man of his era and one of the best of all time, in my opinion. He won titles in 4 divisions with just this crazy combination of ability, this ridiculous motor, and just off the charts punching power. Absolute complete fighter. 41 knockouts for such a little guy is just nuts. And he overcame adversity, which I really like and I really appreciate. He lost back-to-back fights against Srisaket Sorongvasai after his trainer died, which I truly believe threw him off. I think almost everybody thought he was done at that point, but he bounced back to win another, major title and seems to be as good as ever right now. The guy is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And I mean, there's nothing else that I can add to that except that he's also my number 2, and you pretty much nailed it. Also one of my favorite fighters, so I look forward to the day we see him inducted. Let's go to number 1. I got a feeling we got the same number 1. There's a
Yep, I'm be shocked at this point if we didn't have the same guy. It's Canelo Alvarez.
Yes, absolutely. I think he's my number 1 as well, for obvious reasons. I mean, titles from 154 to 175. I think once he became the undisputed 168-pound champion, I mean, that certified his place in the Hall of Fame as far as I'm concerned. I mean, wins over a who's who of guys in those divisions: Gennady Golovkin, Miguel Cotto, on and on, Caleb Plant. And not only that, the biggest star in the sport today as well. So Canelo Alvarez easily gets my vote for number 1.
Yep. Again, ditto everything you said. You could say whatever you want about Canelo, and I have, as you know. The guy has the most impressive resume in boxing. You mentioned the titles in 4 divisions. The guy, the long list of guys he's beaten. He's beaten. I think I got this right. He's beaten 2 current Hall of Famers, and before all is said and done, I think that number will be 4 or 5.
Probably right.
Yeah, and as you said, he became the closest thing there is to the face of the sport after Mayweather and Pacquiao called it quits. One of the best Mexican fighters of all time, and arguably one of the best, regardless of country of origin. I think that Canelo is going to be remembered as a truly great fighter who was willing to take on anybody.
Do you think he's still in his prime? Just wondering.
Ability-wise, he's probably pretty close to his prime, but I don't think 168 is his best weight. I guess the short answer to that should be no. He's probably not quite as good as he was. Plus, he's not at his best at 168. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have moved up to 68. It seems like a natural progression for him, but he might have peaked at 160.
Yeah, you may be right there. And I wonder the same thing. I guess we'll see how he looks in his next fight. And that is going to do it for this week's show. Of course, we want to thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget, guys, Saturday night, great show on Showtime Championship Boxing. PBC returns. Mark Magsayo defending his featherweight title against Ray Vargas in what should be a great night of boxing. We'll be back next week to talk all about it right here on the PBC podcast.